Hi, this is Mrs. Parr, and on this episode of Math Up to Par, we're going to be talking about a way to solve multi-digit multiplication problems. And we're going to use a strategy that's a little bit different than the traditional way of doing it, something I like to call the box method. So the box method is a strategy for multiplying large numbers. It's just an alternative, something different than the traditional method. Not better, not worse, just different. So the box method is based on an area array, okay? So when you first learned about multiplication, you learned about arrays, rows, and columns to demonstrate a multiplication problem. Well, let's look at the problem 27 times 4. Okay, instead of thinking of it 27 times 4, I'm going to think about it like 20 times 4 and then 7 times 4. So my whole row here across, that's 27 pieces, okay? So instead of thinking about it in all 27, I'm going to break it up into 20 over here and 7 over here. 20, 4 rows of 20 is equal to 80. So 4 times 20 is 80. 4 rows of 7 over here is 28. So if I set it up in my box method, I'd say 4 over here, okay, and I'm multiplying 4 times 20, which is 80, and 4 times 7, which is 28, which is what we talked about up here. If I take the 80 squares that are inside here and the 7 squares that are inside over here, and I add them together, I get 108. So 27 times 4 is equal to 108. Let's go through that again. So let's look at this problem. So we have 78 times 32, okay? So I'm going to take my number, 78, and I'm going to break it into expanded form. So I'm going to break it into the tens place, which is 70, and the ones place, which is 8. 70 plus 8 is equal to 78. I'm going to do the same thing with 32. I'm going to break it into expanded form. It's tens, the value of the tens, and the values of the ones. So I'm going to do that going along the side. So I'm going to say 30 plus 2, okay? So now I'm going to look at the amounts inside. So in each box, I'm going to multiply the number that's directly above that box and the number that's directly to the left of that box. So in this problem, I'm going to multiply 7 times 3. 7 times 3 is 21. Okay, the reason I'm not saying 70 times 30 is because of the value of tens. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at those first two numbers. So 7 times 3 is 21. There are 1 0 here, there's 1 0 here, and another 0 here. So I'm going to put the 0 from my 70 here and the 0 from my 30 over here. And I'm going to get 2,100. So 70 times 30 is 2,100. Coming over to this box, I'm going to multiply my 8 times my 30. So I'm looking at 8 times 3. I'm looking at that value. I'm looking at the digit in the tens place. So 8 times 3 is 24. I don't have any zeros in my 8, but I have a 0 in my 30. So I'm going to put a 0 on the end of my number over here. Okay, coming down to the bottom row, looking at these boxes, I'm going to multiply 70 times 2. So I have the 7 in the tens place, and I have the 2 in the ones place. So I'm going to multiply 7 times 2, which is 14. I don't have any zeros after my 2, but I do have a 0 after my 7. So I'm going to put that 0 right there, which is going to equal 140. Now in this corner, I'm going to multiply 8 times 2 because I'm going directly above and directly to the left. Okay, so 8 times 2 is 16. There are no zeros after my 8 or my 2, so I don't need to add any zeros here. So I've now broken apart my numbers, and so I've multiplied the pieces together. So these 4 pieces are going to make up my total amount. They're going to make up my total product. So I'm going to take these numbers and I'm going to very carefully line them up. A trick I like to use when I'm writing on notebook paper is instead of writing it on notebook paper the traditional way, is taking it and turning it so the lines are going vertical instead of horizontal, and they give me a column for each of my numbers. That helps me to keep them organized and neat. So when I add this up, I get 2,496. So my answer to 78 times 32 is 2,496. Okay? And that's how I use the box method to solve that. We can do it with even larger numbers. Okay, so let's say we have 619 and 54. I'm going to break 619 into expanded form. All right, so let's look here. We have 6 times 5, which is 30. And this 0 doesn't count as one of the zeros over here because that is part of my product. That's part of my answer to 6 times 5. So 6 times 5 is 30. And then I have 3 zeros total between 600 and 50. So I'm going to add 3 zeros after my number. I'm going to put my comma, which makes that 30,000. Over here, I have 10 times 50. So I have 1 times 5 is 5. And then I have 2 zeros in between those two numbers. I'm going to add those to the end. Now here, I'm multiplying 9 times 5. 9 times 5 is 45. And I add 1 0 on the end because the 9 doesn't have any, but the 50 has 1. Let's drop down to my bottom row. So this time I'm multiplying the 4 in this row, and I'm multiplying it by each number that comes directly above the box. So 4 times 6 is 24. And then I have 2 zeros in my 600. I don't have any in my 4. Then over here, I have 4 times 1, which is 4. And then I put the 0 after because 4 times 10 is 40. But when I think about it in a different way, I know that 4 times 1 is 4. And then I put a 0, so it's equal to 40. So it's just two different ways of thinking. So now in my last box, I have 4 times 9. 4 times 9 is 36. There aren't any zeros after it, so I do not need to add any to my number. Okay, I'm going to line this up and make this as neat as I possibly can. So I'm going to do 30,000. And I tend to put a little check mark, and I should have done this in the other problem to show you, especially when you're doing 6 digits. A common mistake is to forget to add one of the boxes. And then you've done all of that work, you forget to add in one box, and you get the wrong number. So you want to make sure that you have put every single box into your addition problem. So I'm going to check it off as I go, and I try to add the biggest numbers first just to help me line them up. So I forgot a comma over here for my 2,400. So I'm going to go ahead and write 2,400 over here. And then my next biggest number is 500, making sure I'm lining up my places evenly. Then I have 450. Then I have 40. Then I have 36. And I'm going to double check. I have 6 boxes here, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers. I'm telling you, it's a quick count to double check and make sure, because it's a bummer to do all that work and then forget to add a number and then get your answer wrong. So as I add up, checking very carefully, 5 plus 4 is 9, plus 3 is 12, making sure I get all of my numbers. I try to make tens with this, so like 5 plus 4 is 9, plus 1 more is 10, and then I can easily add 10 plus 4, which is 14. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus nothing is 3. So my answer is 33,426. Okay? So with the box method, you're just breaking the number into smaller pieces and multiplying it by that. It's less steps to remember with crisscrossing like you do in the traditional method, but it is more addition, as you can see on the screen. There's pros and cons to both methods, and there are other methods besides these two that you can use to multiply as well. The cool thing about math is that just like when you're getting directions to a place, normally your GPS on your phone is going to give you more than one route to take. Some of them might be longer, some of them might be more scenic, some of them might be quicker, but it's going to get you to the same place. So this is going to give you the same answer that the traditional method is going to. So if there's a strategy that works better for you, then use that strategy. You don't have to use the same strategy that everybody else is using. Use what works for you. So the box method is just a different way to solve a multiplication problem. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just a different strategy. And for some people, they're going to prefer it, and some people are not. So I encourage you to give it a try. I encourage you to practice and see which way you like best. Okay, so thank you so much for listening and happy practicing.